Okay. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. So I see that we have 7 participants here, but we are signed up with about 16. So we'll just give a minute more for people to join. But meanwhile, we can just introduce the workshop and ourselves. So we are from Bri Youth Council, as you can see. My name is Sangeeta Bansal, and I'm the wellness director. So I do more preventative programs for youth mental health. And we work with all of community, like elementary, middle, and high school teachers, parents, everyone. And my colleague Laura will introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Laura Whitman. I am the clinical supervisor, one of the clinical supervisors at our Restore program. We serve clients aged 5 to 22 here. I have a background in counseling. I've worked in outpatient settings and also in school-based settings. And so that's my background.
Thanks, Laura. And next slide, but I'll just give everyone a quick opportunity to either chime in into the chat and introduce yourselves in terms of what age group kids do you have? How many kids do you have in what age group? This gives us an idea how to kind of orient the talk. And if you want to introduce yourself, now is your opportunity. You just unmute yourself, and if you want to share uh, your your video, but just let us know in the chat, like about the age group. And okay, so I'm guessing no one wants to. Okay, hi Paula, 12-year-old. Okay, and that's fine. Awesome. Who else is here? Okay. So our workshop today is about hi Jennifer, 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. Yeah, just keep putting in your children's age group. My colleague Laura will pick it up. So our workshop is on emotions, and the most common thing we know with emotions is they come on really strong, and before you know it, we have a reaction to that emotion because it's very kind of close to our heart. And then when it comes to our kids, it's even more close to our heart because it's one of the most important relationships we have. I'm very invested in this relationship, and our hearts are involved, and and we feel extremely triggered sometimes by our kids. So this workshop is an attempt to understand some of those emotions from ourselves as well as from our kids. And a thing that is well known in the therapy circles is that a response would be much preferred over a reaction. In fact, it is so much more preferred that it's also known as a superpower. Because if we master the ability to be able to respond to someone else's emotional meltdown, for example, we gain the superpower of having to have a better relationship with that person. A reaction always escalates the situation, whereas a response will actually regulate it. Your reactions generally tend to come from your body, they're fast, whereas a response is more intentional, slower, and it includes your prefrontal cortex, your mind. It's not just coming from your amygdala, from the instinctive response. A reaction is all about controlling the situation, whereas response is about connecting with the person that you're, talking to. A reaction might focus on the mistake that the person made, whereas a response will focus on what do we need in this moment to move forward. So these are some of the things that the responsibility will kind of give us the superpower to handle situations in our lives in a better way. Next slide, please. So, at this time, I invite you to think about any time you had an emotional reaction to an event that occurred with a loved one. Could be anyone, maybe even, I mean, we are all also the children of someone, so we may have had a reaction as a child, or we may have had a reaction as a parent. When we talk about an emotion and an emotional reaction, there's usually 4 things that are involved. There are certain thoughts that are going through our heads. There are certain feelings that are rushing through our nervous system. There are certain actions or behavior we take as a result of those thoughts and feelings. And then there's a consequence to that action that we take. And this is a good framework to think about anybody having an emotional reaction. So I can share like one example where my daughter came back from school and she brought this beautiful artwork that she had worked really hard on, and she came rushing to me. I was at the kitchen counter preparing some kind of juice, and as she showed me the artwork, she knocked down the glass of juice that was lying on the counter had been made laboriously for her, and the juice spilled over the art project. Now, there was a lot of emotions that came up for her because she had worked really hard on the project, and there were a lot of emotions that came up for me because I had worked hard on the juice for her, and I really wanted her to have this juice. So my first thought was how clumsy of her, and she's always in a rush and she's always doing this. And my feelings were frustration and resentment that I would have to do this juicing thing again. And my first action at that time was, could you not be more careful, please, next time you come close to me? And of course, the outcome of my reaction was that she was even more mad that I did not acknowledge the ruined artwork, and she went in crying in a storm to her room. So that's kind of like a situation, a good, like an example of a situation that might happen. Um, and if any of you want to share any reflection on a thing, then please feel to do that later when we have Q&A. If you have a situation where you would like to kind of ponder over your thoughts, feelings, the actions, and the consequences. Next slide, please. So when we have an emotional, there are many kinds of emotions, right? There's good emotions, bad emotions, neutral emotions, difficult emotions. Having emotions is what makes life colorful and enjoyable. They're actually normal, adaptive. They're constantly happening in our heads and our minds and our hearts. There are situations that trigger those emotions from the external environment, and there are people that are more triggering than others. There are situations that may be more triggering than others, and not always can we control that kind of a situation. For example, you're dropping your kid off to school and you're driving, in a 20-mile zone, and somebody just like cuts you off and takes, goes ahead of you and takes the last parking spot you had available. And of course, that's very triggering, and we can't control something like that. And but there are things that we can control, so we're going to try to focus more on those. Next slide, please. So what we can control is our reactions to our emotions, what actions we take, what we choose to make out of that situation, what's our understanding of what caused that emotion in the first place, and also our ability to tolerate strong emotions. Like when my now grown child is coming at me with something critical, she's giving me some harsh feedback and criticism, which older children are very generous with sometimes. I notice that I have, a like almost like a lesser ability to tolerate this from when it's coming from my child because I'm more emotionally invested. So there are many situations where I wish I would take a step back and wait a little bit before my defensiveness comes in, and I want to protect or defend myself against the, so that's the one place we have control. Remember that tiny pause we talked about between your event and your reaction, and in that tiny pause lies our superpower, which is our ability to change that reaction into something more productive. So with awareness, tools, and practice, we can build on this repertoire of choices that we may have, which we don't have when we think it's okay to react. But as soon as we give ourselves a little bit of a pause, we realize that a whole array of choices opens up in front of us, and we can actually choose something more from the frontal brain rather than from our limbic system. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the things when we build awareness is to become more aware of what kinds of triggers am I more susceptible to. Some of these may be more for you than for others. Some of them may be more for me. Kids have a way of sometimes, doing all of these on the same day even. And some of the things that, really are my pet peeves are, like, for example, disrespect could be either verbal or it could be body language, just like eye rolling or just shrugging shoulders, or just kind of, that they have this like this whole attitude thing going on. It could be the tone of their voice. It's not so much the words they're using, but just the tone. It could also be like talking back to you, showing disrespect. You might experience at some point being ignored, like you're giving an instruction again and again, you're asking them to pick up. Would you be able to send me? Yes, we will be. Oh, we do have recordings. Yes, we can probably send recordings to everyone, but I'll try to raise my volume here as well, and let me know if that helps. And we'll also be sharing slides later. So please, stay for the presentation if you can, but we will be happy to share slides and maybe even the recording. So know your triggers. Disrespect is, oh, okay. She can't hear me at all. Is anyone else having problems hearing me? Because Claudia cannot hear me at all. Okay, Jennifer can hear me. Great. So then, recurring mess and chaos. Thank you, everyone. That's good. Time pressure. You're getting late for school, getting late for an activity, getting late for a practice, and the child is always, procrastinating at the last minute. Public behavior. It really pushes our buttons when we are in company and the child decides to act out in public. A defiance is like absolutely a refusal to cooperate. Like, can you please do this for me? And they just ignore you. Displaying emotional intensity, like meltdowns, crying, whining. Sibling conflict, there's constant noise in the house. You've just come back home from work and you're looking for a little quiet moment, and then there's this constant running around, fighting, hitting. Mom, do you see what he did? Do you see what she did? Constant arguments. And then sometimes even the children's struggles are triggering for us, because we feel like, okay, you had this situation where you had this test, you knew about it like a month ago, and you had time to prepare or ask for help, and you didn't do it, and you're not motivated, and you're not taking responsibility for your homework and for your assignments. And those kinds of things can also be because we all dealing with so much. We all have so much going on. Next slide, please. So before we do anything, it's good to just take a step back and check the basics. Like when your child is having some kind of a reaction, or you yourself may be having a reaction, it's good to check, am I or my child possibly hungry, angry about something else, something that happened at work, or maybe something that happened with them, feeling a little left out or lonely, like is there a possible situation that my child was not invited for something and they're feeling a little left out, and they're acting up with me because of something that's going on in the back of their head. So we can always ask questions to find out if any of these are true. And sometimes it's just being tired at the end of a long day. Next slide, please. Another thing that's really important to understand when we are dealing with our children is that we all have a nervous system and we all have a brain, and all our brains are divided into the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Now, emotions and feelings and those kinds of things are more of a right brain territory. They come from the right brain. The right brain is great at expressing, like all the great musicians and artists and writers actually have very active, very high functioning right brains. So, and they might be also very emotional. The only thing that the right brain doesn't do is create good logic and good analytical reasoning as to why I'm feeling this way. So, for example, your child might say something like, I'm so upset and I'm so mad that my birthday is not coming for another 10 months. And that's the reason that he's going to be really upset today. Or, Mommy, you don't do anything for me. You didn't leave me a note in the middle of the night when I woke up and I was scared. So, okay, there's no like logic at that point coming from the child. And if you as a parent try to respond from the logical left brain You try to tell them, but that doesn't make any sense. You just had a birthday 2 months ago. You know birthdays come. That's probably not going to hit the right spot for him. Because when he's coming from the right brain, what he wants is you to come into the same attunement with him, coming from a right brain side, and which means he just wants connection at that point. Oh, honey, I know how you feel. That must be such a bummer that you have to attend so many birthday parties before yours comes around. How about we do a private celebration just for the two of us, or something like that? Like, just make them feel heard and validated in their, non-logical rumination. And after you connect, then you can redirect their brain to the more logical side of things. But first, the connection. First, let them talk it out. What is bothering them? So this helps integrate the brain. So in psychology, they talk a lot about integration of different aspects of the brain, and let the whole brain work together as a team rather than so. And the most important thing to remember is that when they're coming from a right brain, don't you also be in the right brain. That means don't have an emotional reaction to match theirs, and don't be in a logical, analytical side either, but kind of first just find a way to connect and de escalate. Okay. Having them name it to tame it is another great strategy. Just let them know how to find words for their emotions and tell the story. That every time a child tells the story of what's bothering him, it helps connect the left and the right brain, because the emotion is sitting in the right brain, but the ability to create a story out of it is sitting in the left brain. So that helps them make sense of it and helps them integrate their brains. Next slide, please. A great strategy that helps children, and is easy one to remember, is SIFT. Help children be more self-aware. When we talk about self-awareness, what are we talking about? It's a really nice thing to say that, oh, he or she is so self-aware. What does it really mean? It means they have an ability to know what's going on in their bodies, in their minds, in terms of body sensations, what images are flashing through their heads, what feelings are coming up, what ruminating thoughts might be coming up. If a person can be self-aware on these kinds of things, then they are known to be very emotionally intelligent, for example. They're very highly sensitive people, and who can sense these things not only in themselves, but in others as well. So have your child switch to body sensations. Hey, how does that feel in your body? Do you have butterflies in your stomach? Like a child says, I can't sleep because I'm scared of mummies. I'm afraid a mummy is going to come out of somewhere and bite me. So try SIFT. Hey, instead of trying to offer a logical explanation that we don't have mummies walking around in the middle of the night, hey, what does your body say about that? Let's change the image. Like, oh, should we dress up that mummy? What was your favorite Halloween costume last year? Let's imagine the mummy wearing the costume. The child might like crack up. It's changing the image of what's scaring him. So the thing to remember is S, I, and F are all coming from your right side of the brain, from the child's right side of the brain. So the thoughts that he's telling, when you kind of change the story, tell him, okay, let's think of a happier thing, thought to think before we go to sleep. How about our upcoming vacation, or the trip to grandma's, or something that's coming up? Let's talk about that. When you change the story, change the thought, you're shifting them over to the left brain. Next slide, please. Another great acronym that is used a lot in mindfulness is using this technique of RAIN, using emotions to your advantage. As I said, emotions happen to everyone. They're normal, but some of us get flummoxed by what to do with them at different times of our lives. It happens to all of us, and definitely to our kids who are not as regulated as we might be. So learning to use emotions to your advantage is, again, a superpower. So the first step is to recognize, name it. What is this emotion that's coming up? Okay, I'm feeling angry, or am I feeling resentful, or I'm feeling something else, sad maybe. What is the emotion? What if I had to name it? Already, by trying to name the emotion, you've switched to the left side of the brain. Accept it rather than fight it and find someone to blame for it. Say, okay, this is happening. Whether I like it or not, this is happening right now. Investigation is the most fun part, I find, even though it's also very challenging. It's like, what lies beneath? What lies beneath this emotion? I'm reacting to my child, but is there some hidden need of mine that's not being met? Like, Is there something that is personal to me that's making me have this reaction? And then nurture is to like remember to nurture both yourself and your child in the situation, so that you can move forward with a like a better relationship, a stronger relationship, and not let that become a bad memory. Next slide, please. So like a quick example here would be something like you feel, one day that I'm tired, I've done so much, I, did the laundry, I made their food, I helped them with their homework, drove them around all day, and I never felt like appreciated. I never heard anyone say thank you ever today in a week or a month. So recognize, what am I feeling? I'm feeling unappreciated and I'm feeling a bit resentful, frankly, after all that I do. Allow it. It's okay. Like, okay, that doesn't make me like, a bad person for feeling like I know that, I don't need my kids to thank me. As they say, every generation pays it forward. Like, we always forget to thank our parents, but we, then do the same thing to our kids. So it's okay to feel this way. This is a human reaction. So normalize it. It's human. Investigate, like, why am I feeling unseen or taken for granted? Am I tired? I definitely need some acknowledgement and validation for the work that I do. And nurture, maybe I can nurture myself by talking to my spouse about it and saying that, do you think it would be a good idea to have the kids do a gratitude journal once in a while, and kind of have them remember. It's a great skill. It's also a great technique to practice great gratitude. So maybe we should teach our kids that. It would be great for us to kind of do that as a family maybe sometimes. So these are the ways you can remember the RAIN acronym, which is great for also, it's a great strategy for responding versus reacting. Next slide, please. So the bottom line is that the trigger that's happening from supposedly or seemingly outside of you is not the real problem. It's the signal, and it's also your choice in that moment of how you want to react to it. So like the button may be getting pushed, but remember the button was already installed in you before it got pushed. And it's a good idea to step back sometimes and take widen your perspective, so to speak, and say, okay, maybe there's some unmet need at signal, there's some past experience, like last time this happened, then this is what it happened, so now this next time I get triggered even faster, and my nervous system gets under stress. A great example of this is called reframing in like CBT therapy, is like somebody is cutting you off in traffic, and you get really annoyed and irritated with that person because you've been patiently waiting, in the right lane, and then somebody just squeezes in at the last minute for the exit, and I always tell myself, okay, you know what? Maybe he really needs to get somewhere in time. Maybe his wife's having a baby and she's in the hospital, or maybe his mom's sick and he needs to get to her, and that, whether that is true or not, that changes the way how I feel, and I have emotionally regulated myself, and I've let go of something that would be irritating for me and escalating it by honking at him or cursing at him, and then my day goes downward from there, right? So I kind of nipped it in the bud. It's whatever, it's done, happened, move on. Next slide, please. So this is a really big topic, this whole topic of conscious parenting, and some of the good books that I found on this is one by Dr. Shefali called The Parenting. She has many good books, New York Times bestsellers, and she's a big favorite of Oprah. And then Dan Siegel, also another good psychotherapist, who wrote Parenting from the Inside Out. And basically what he's saying is, when you're having an emotional turbulent environment, could be with anyone, but as we are discussing our children here, first of all, destroy the fantasy. This is from Dr. Shefali's book, and she says, destroy what in your mind looks like a perfect child, and then your child is not fitting that bill. Destroy that fantasy. Your child is perfect in his or her own way, just like you as a mother or father are perfect in your own way. Relinquish the feeling of control and conditionality. That means that I want my child to do this. I want my child to practice piano for 30 minutes a day. I want my child, if my child does this, then he's a good kid. And if he doesn't, then he's, not doing things right. So just, and also like this feeling of like, if he does this, then I would be proud. And she warns against this because we have our own ideas of what is success, what is happiness, and what makes a human being complete. But our children are really their own complete human beings in themselves. And even though they come through us, they don't belong to us in any way. They are their own. They will become wonderful humans in their own right. And their ideas of success and happiness may be very different. And time will tell. They might be even right in what, whatever they're feeling. Holding space for your child's feelings of sadness and struggle, so don't, like I said, don't come at them with the right brain. Let them share what they're feeling, and just hold space, even though it may sound ridiculous and doesn't make any logical sense. Try not to fix everything for your child when something goes wrong. If they're having trouble with a friend, let them come up with their own solutions rather than saying, I'm going to go talk to your friend. And discard labels like you're lazy, or you always do this, you're late. And so labels, you're difficult, you're a difficult child. Rather than saying that in your head, you can say, my child is having a difficult moment. So the labels are very they ossify people in certain personality types, and that's very unhealthy. So I think that's it from my side, and I will let Laura take the stage now.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about things a little bit from a more micro perspective in terms of what I work on with children in sessions, and also when I used to work in the milieu in schools and things of that nature. And so a lot of times you have a kid having a reaction, and then someone would bring that child down to us to sort of help them to de-escalate. And so this is sort of like the process that I would use to sort of start from the beginning and figuring out what's going on, and helping to figure out how to get them not only to calm down but also to process the situation. And so in cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of what we do is about helping kids to make connections. And so there really is a series of steps that happens when there's a reactive episode, but kids often don't realize that all of these different things are happening. And so if you ask a child, they're going to give you some oversimplified response. They're not really going to understand that these steps exist. And so we start with a trigger. So a trigger happens. A trigger can be external to us, like something in our environment, and it can also be something internal, like an unhelpful thought that we tell ourselves, which shifts our perception about an event. And then we experience an emotional response. After that emotion, there is this moment where we can stop and pause to process the emotion, although most young kids sort of just fly right by that opportunity and go right into that reactive behavior kind of piece. And even one step beyond that, what's on this slide is the consequences, or the consequences of your behavior, right? The reaction that happens from your environment based on how you chose to act, right? And so the thing that we can do for kids that's most helpful is try to help them to understand these different steps, like where things broke down. And so we can help them figure out a better way to handle it the next time. So one example would be, like a child is in a busy lunchroom. One of their friends says something about their mother. Their emotion they experience is anger. Then they react by pushing that child or shoving them. And that all happened to them very quickly. But there's ways that we can sort of process with them to slow it down. Another example of this chain would be for a child that's more anxious. The trigger could be yesterday in school, one of my friends didn't want to sit with me at lunch, and then the emotion that they're feeling is rejection or nervousness about what's going to happen the next day. And so their response might be that they don't want to go to school in the morning, right? And then the next day, that trigger could then become an internalized thought that they're having. So that could kind of change this cycle. The trigger could then become something that they're feeling about, like my friends don't want to sit with me or things like that. And so it's really important that we intervene in this as adults. We help kids to support with this processing, because if we leave unhelpful beliefs or perceptions in place, it can lead to poor behavioral choices, but it can also lead to these patterns of reactivity to similar types of triggers. And so when we think about interrupting the chain, helping kids to interrupt that chain, what we want to think about how regulated they are in the moment. So when kids are dysregulated, we need to de-escalate them first. A child that's already at 10 out of anger, they can't really process language very well. They can't make rational thoughts or choices in those moments. And so we really need to focus first on that de-escalation piece. And we'll kind of circle back to that in a few minutes. Like, how would we work to de-escalate? But in terms of like the processing moment, so once they have started to calm down, then we want to offer some care connection. So like the example that I usually use when I'm describing this is, there I'm working in a school, there's a child that comes down to me. By the time he gets to me, he is kind of in this ebb between escalations. So he had his escalation in class. He shows up, he's still a little red in the face, he's still breathing a little heavy. So that he's really at this tipping point of like he could re-escalate very quickly if I push him too hard or if I try to dig in too deep too fast. And so in that moment, my first reaction is going to be to ask him if he needs some space first. Do you need some space? Do you want a few minutes to calm down? And then I'm going to offer, like, do you want a drink of water? Do you need a tissue? Do you need to use the bathroom? Like, whatever things we can do to sort of offer some of that caring connection to show that we have concern for them, that we still feel connected with them, even though that they may have acted in a way that we don't support in that moment. And so he's in there, he's calming down. I get the call from the administrator who is describing to me what happened in the hallway. And the administrator tells me that the child wouldn't take his hat off. He became disrespectful to the teacher, and then when the administrator pulled him out of class, he also was disrespectful, wouldn't cooperate with removing the hat. And then that's where he sort of like came to me. And so then once this child's a little calmer, I'm starting to see like the helpful signs of like he looks more regulated. The first thing I'm going to do is listen or try to ask open-ended questions to try to get him to say more to me. I want to get his perspective, and I also want to further de-escalate him. And so a lot of times adults will jump in first with consequences or reactions to the event that just occurred, and there's a moment for that. But if you start with that, the child puts their wall up, and so it's much more helpful to first process with them kind of their perspective of the events. So that will help diffuse their anger even further. And then second of all, you'll get a lot of helpful information about what their perspective is, because a lot of times there's something missing in the puzzle that we don't really understand as adults that maybe the child couldn't figure out how to communicate. And so basically this child's in my office. So I start by saying, what happened? Can you tell me, like, from your perspective, what happened in the situation? You seemed really upset when you came in, and I hate to see you this way, and I want to be able to help you. And so the child tells me, I didn't want to take my hat off. The teacher kept asking me, I kept saying no. And then it was just getting on my nerves. And then I, snapped at her. And then the administrator came, the assistant principal came and pulled me in the hall. And then I told him I can't take off my hat today. Like, I can't take it off today. And then he told me I was going to get detention. So that made me even more mad. And so now that's how I got down here, And so my first follow-up question to this child is like, well, why can't you take the hat off today? Like, what is it about today that we can't remove the hat? And the child puts their head down for a moment, then thinks about it, sits back up and says, well, like, my mom gave me this haircut last night and it's terrible. And if I take my hat off, then these kids are going to harass me the rest of the year. They're just going to be relentless, and I just can't let them see my haircut. So I'll just take the detention. I just won't go to class today. That's fine if that's what I have to do to like get out of that situation. And so just sort of by asking that why, being inquisitive, taking this approach of like trying to take a minute to get them to sort of like get their walls lowered a little bit for them to believe that I really want to help them. That like now we've learned so much information about what was going on that maybe could have been prevented in another way. So, and then the other thing I'd just like to highlight in this section, so this is about like using open-ended prompts rather than giving advice. So we want to ask those questions. But I also like to highlight the idea about like being able to make different choices here, because I think a lot of times like a kid can only think of the choice that they chose, like the one that was immediately in front of them. And so by helping them to sort of generate what other options might have been available to them, if they can generate them, they're more likely to use them, but also it helps to create these like, different neural pathways for them so that the next time an event like this occurs, they think that they could think through the options that exist to them. So in this case, maybe, the child could have, upon arriving to school, he actually has a good relationship with this administrator. Like, maybe he could have popped in his office and said, I know the rules of this school, but like help me out today. Like I'm in bad shape today, and I don't want all the kids to be making fun of me. So there was like a proactive choice he could have made in the instance of shoving a child in the cafeteria. There's lots of choices that adults could think of that kids don't always think of in the moment. But if we can help them kind of think through what those options are, then maybe the next time someone says something, they could choose a different choice. After that, once we kind of like figure out what's going on with the timeline, then I like to try to help kids to connect to the feeling that they're experiencing. So we can use reflective statements to help them to connect to emotion. And you have to know your child, you have to know the child you're working with. Some kids are going to be way more open to this, and others are going to be more sort of reserved and not willing to share how they feel. And you don't have to force it if that's not the mood they're in, but a lot of times I'll just sort of rephrase what they said to me, so it sounds like you were really worried about being made fun of. You were really worried that you were going to feel embarrassed if you took your hat off. And then you got frustrated because you felt like the adults didn't understand what was going on. And part of that was because of his, lack of communication, but that's not necessarily how he's thinking in that moment. So yeah, so then if there's a child who is like more likely to not take that feedback well, or if after you say that they're like, no, that's not what I was feeling, then sometimes you can also use like more neutral prompts. Well, like I might feel in that situation this way, or some kids might feel in that situation. And even if they don't sort of acknowledge it in that moment and don't process it in that moment, like they still hear it and absorb it, and it still kind of builds their skill set around, we're just trying to strengthen this, like these emotional regulation muscles in general. I'm having a trouble with my slide. Okay, here we go. And I like to point that out because emotions are often multi-layered. Kids will also often default to anger because it's a safer emotion, it's less vulnerable, and it's like a more familiar emotion. And so behind anger can be a lot of things. It can be like embarrassment, it can be a feeling of rejection, it could be nervousness, it could be a lot of different things. And so we just want to make sure we're trying to get to more of that core of like what the root of the root feeling is, what the root beliefs are, because again, we want to make sure we're addressing like what the actual issue is. And if we're only focused on like the anger that's presenting and not the feeling they're actually experiencing, then it might not have as much success in helping them navigate it in the future. Some other things that can be helpful, you can instill confidence in them. You can say things like, you've gotten through something like this before, so I know that you're capable of doing it again. And how do you think you got through it last time? You can help them with perspective taking, which is really helpful because once you've sort of identified what was going on and how they were feeling, it's also really helpful for them to understand how other people in that situation might have been affected or how other people were feeling. And usually by the time you've got to this part of the processing, they're more open-minded to hearing that. If you start right away with like, how did you think your teacher felt in that moment, they're probably going to be defensive, but we've already heard them out. We've heard their whole side of the story. And so now we can circle back and say, I think, like, can we think about what was going on for your teacher in that moment? And they might be able to say, well, it is a school rule. Like, I think she's just trying to enforce the rules, or I know she was trying to get the class sorted, so she was probably feeling frustrated, or things like that. And so then you can kind of help them to make this the even further depth of connections. And then from there, you can talk about what the next steps are. So in this case, the administrator was able to come down, talk to the child explain what was going on. The administrator's like, we can't wear a hat forever, so what is our plan? Like, even if I let you wear a hat for one day, then where are we at? And he was able to say, my uncle can help me fix it this weekend, just today, if I can just wear the hat today. And then they're able to have these follow-up conversations where the child's able and willing to apologize because he understands like the whole situation. He's gotten some of his needs met, and so now he's able to also meet the needs of the people around him. And so that's more of like reacting to behavior in the moment. And this this slide is more focused on how we can sort of proactively support regulation at home. And so we can create a daily practice of emotion identification. A lot of times it is really helpful to just have a regular practice of checking in with your kids about how they're feeling. Get them used to sort of sharing how they're feeling, get them comfortable with the concept of like their feelings can be shared with safe people, safe adults, trusted adults. And then that also helps you with early intervention as well. I often say a lot of times to parents, like, do a check-in, and I'll show you one of the tools we use in a minute, but do a check-in like right after kids get back from school because they're probably holding like a lot from school or if things happened at school. And like if we can catch them in that moment before we're seeing the observable signs, if they come home and they seem okay, but we take that minute to just sort of be like, how was the day today? Like what zone are you in today or how are you feeling today? That can be really helpful for them to be able to identify maybe early on, like, well, it wasn't that great of a day, and I'm actually feeling a little frustrated or whatever it is. And then if they are able to share that, then like we can intervene quicker before we get to a place where we're having a meltdown. So it's always like the more early intervention that you can do, the better. We really want to normalize that feelings are all valid, but we are responsible for our actions and our behaviors. So we really want to separate behaviors and feelings. So you can validate a child's feeling in the moment. You can say, I actually really understand why you were frustrated, but also we have to keep a safe body. Like, but also you're not able to put your hands on your brother or whatever it is. Like, we can sort of say why that we understand them and understand their feeling. And we can say that it's normal to have those feelings of anger, and still hold them accountable for the behaviors that they presented with. A lot of times kids will come into counseling and that when we talk about goals, they'll say, I just want to never be angry again. But that's just really not realistic. So what we're really trying to do is help them to understand and recognize when I'm starting to feel that way. And then how can I channel that into something that's more productive? And so the language does make a difference because we do want them to feel comfortable to feel those emotions so that they feel comfortable to share the emotions. We can also help kids notice when they are becoming dysregulated by identifying like their body's warning signs. And so as adults, we can probably all think about a time where we felt angry and we felt anxious, and we might be able to connect that to some of the somatic symptoms that come with that. Like when you're feeling anxious, sometimes you get a pit in your stomach. Sometimes your heart might be racing. When you're angry, you might be clenching your teeth or your fists, or you might be red in the face or feeling hot. And so I think that kids are not very good at identifying those things. And so the more we can help them to kind of clue into their own bodies and their own experiences, that's going to help them to be able to figure out when they need to regulate themselves. We then, like, the last sort of step here is to build a toolbox of coping skills. But a lot of times people try to give kids coping skills, but they don't really teach them like when to use them or how to know if you need to use one. And so they can practice them calm, no problem. But in that moment when it comes, they're usually already escalated to 10. And if we can catch it more at like 6 or 7 as they're going kind of up the scale, they might actually be able to access those strategies. The other part is that it's just really important to guest test and revise. Like not every skill is going to work for every child. And so we can have them generate options. And then, we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to check, before you use the skill, where was your emotion out of 10? After you use the skill, how are you feeling? If that barometer doesn't sort of go down, then it's probably not an effective strategy for that person. When you're working with like younger children, visuals are always like super helpful. So we have like some books here on this slide and some other activities and things that you can do with kids. Sometimes young kids won't be able or willing to share how they're feeling, but they can talk about things from a third person perspective. And so if you get books or you talk about emotional regulation within their favorite characters with the TV shows they're watching or movies or books, you just point it out while you're reading the book with them, like, oh, wow, it seems like that person got really mad. Like, what did he do about the way he was feeling? Like, or how did he act after that? Any connections that they're making between, like, triggers and emotions with their behaviors, that's all going to be helpful, like building blocks for them, whether it's about them or not about them. And so even as young, my daughter is almost 4, and even as young as 3 or 4, you can start having some of these conversations and build that like emotional literacy so that they kind of understand words that they can use to describe how they're feeling, and that it happens to other people as well and not just them. This is one of the tools that we use often with young kids, elementary age kids, called the zones of regulation. And the thing I like the most about this is that it combines a lot of different pieces together. And so it makes it really easy to access. It was actually designed for neurodivergent children. And the idea is that they can access communicating to you in a lot of different ways. And so sometimes the zone itself, the blue color, is easier for kids to communicate than the words that are part of that zone. But then it also incorporates both like feeling words and a state of regulation. And a lot of times I find that kids can connect to that state of regulation before they can connect to the feeling words. And so if you're in the blue zone, you are maybe sad or tired or sick, but your energy is really low. You're moving slowly. Like it feels like you're dragging. Like those types of things kids relate to better sometimes than the feeling word themselves. Green is like we are happy, but we're also calm and focused. A lot of times kids make the mistake of sort of saying, I'm happy, so I'm in the green zone. But really, we want to focus on that state of regulation. Are you happy, but you're bouncing off the walls? Are you happy, but you can't sit in a chair and focus on your homework? Then, like, probably you're not in the green zone. You're probably in the yellow zone. And that can be confusing at first, but that's why feedback's important with this. And then in the yellow zone, that is kind of this like heightened state of arousal. Like you have, more energy than maybe is appropriate for the context, but it could be a lot of different feelings. This could be like frustrated or annoyed. This could be worried or scared. This could be silly or wiggly. Like a lot of times kids that have ADHD sort of like live a little bit more in this yellow zone than the green. And so they need to take a more active role in trying to figure out ways to make their body feel just right. And the red zone is obviously we're at this loss of control. So by the time we get to that red zone, we're no longer really rational. We're no longer really able to use words or things to sort of help us. And so at that, we want to prevent and whenever we possible getting to that stage. And also I like to notice I like to note that like uncontrollable crying could also fit in this zone. Like it's not only anger, but any sort of like level of dysregulation where like the child isn't really able to hear you or access their words or listen to what you're saying. And this is like a thing that we often give parents to use at home. You can put this on the fridge. We like laminate them. You can get a magnet for each member of the family. You can get or like a little clothespin. You write people's name on each of them, and then the identified child can practice identifying their feelings, but also the other members of the family can. And the more modeling there is, the better. So even if when you're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed or anxious, if you kind of just sort of demonstrate like, oh, I'm going to move my magnet to yellow and I'm going to say like, oh, I feel really overwhelmed right now. I had a really stressful day. I'm going to go do this strategy to help myself. And then that's modeling for them that this is something that everybody can use. It's a tool for everyone and it's not just sort of singling them out. And that can be really like effective. Even if you have younger kids as well, then they'll start to like learn the strategies as their older sibling is. And so it can be kind of just like a common language that can be used in the household. And this one is a toolbox. So this one is basically matching the former zones. But the thing that's really important to know is that when you're helping kids come up with strategies, you really want to be coming up with strategies that are matching the state of regulation that they're currently in. And so if you're in the blue zone, and again, this applies to older kids and adults as well, this idea, the visuals are helpful for the younger kids, but the ideas apply to anyone. When we're in the blue zone, when we're having low energy, low motivation, maybe some depressive type symptoms in like a teenager or an adult, when we're sort of having this like trouble getting started or getting moving, we want to do energizing and alerting things that kind of shift our energy up. In counseling, there's something that we do called behavioral activation, which is basically the theory that like if you start to do the things, if you increase your engagement with other people, if you increase your connection, if you can increase your activity, then like your mood will shift to match it, And so the more that we can kind of like put the tools in front of them, help them to choose a choice that is more activating, that's going to shift them more upward. And then in yellow and red, we need things that are going to shift them to more calming. And a lot of the strategies for yellow and red might be similar. It's just important to note that if you're in the red zone already, some strategies might no longer be be viable. Like kids that like to color or draw to calm down or write in a journal, they might not be wanting to do that when they're all the way in the red zone. Instead, something that's more movement based or taking some space away or taking a walk or things like that might be more helpful than something that's much more intricate and requires more like cognitive functioning. And then this is just to highlight a couple of specific strategies. So a lot of times kids will say, they'll listen to music as a strategy, or they'll do some kind of movement as a strategy. But you just really want to make sure that the strategies that they're choosing like actually match what they need in that moment. And so when they're having like low mood or low energy, that's when we want the heart rate to go up. So cardio kind of activities are more helpful in that blue zone to kind of get kids activated. And when you're in more of that high energy side, when you're more angry or hyper or irritable, we want to look more at like resistance or weight-based exercise because we don't necessarily want the heart rate to further increase. But a lot of times kids that maybe have too much energy, they might seek out like play fighting or wrestling or things like that, and they're seeking some kind of input to their body. And so if we can help them to find a way to sort of channel that in a more helpful way, like yoga is more of a resistance-based exercise, weight training, lifting heavy things. Some kids like to be like, wrapped really tight in a blanket or like a hug, things like that. Whatever works for them to sort of like help their body feel more regulated is helpful. And then with the music, it's the sort of the same principle. Like if you have ever had like a bad breakup or, a time when you were really, really sad, and you were laying in bed and then you're listening to sad songs, it sort of like reinforces the way you're already feeling. Listening to some more upbeat music, something you can dance to might be helpful in helping you to shift your mood than the thing that's reinforcing how you're already feeling. And on the other side, if you're, in traffic and you're angry and you are just getting really mad at what's going on in front of you, and then you put like DMX on the radio, it's probably gonna reinforce your feelings of anger, right? Like it's something you want something instead in that moment that's going to be more down regulating, something that's going to be calming and soothing. And then I think we have just a few more minutes. Sangeeta is going to do one breathwork exercise with you all before we go. And then I'm also going to put into the chat the link for a survey, a feedback survey. So after this exercise, if people can take a moment to please fill that out. And we're also happy to hang out for questions if needed.
Sorry, I was on mute. So, depending on the age of your child, there are several breathing techniques that I teach, which are which change your state, like the nervous system state from, you can either go from, the blue zone to the green zone, or you can bring yourself back from the yellow and red zone to the green zone. So let's assume that the child is in the yellow or the red zone. So you want to help them calm down. So a great practice, especially if you have a really young child, is to kind of lie down on the bed or the couch together with them. Maybe place their favorite stuffed animal on their bellies and have them do belly breathing, in which they feel like let's say it's a bunny, the bunny is rising, so they're kind of helping bunny breathe. So the bunny is rising as they're raising their bellies, and then the bunny collapses down towards the spine as they exhale. So I'll have you try it out with me. You can do it sitting right now, but you have options for this. You can do it while sitting or laying down with your child, or together is a great option. So just sit up straight with your shoulders relaxed and your feet flat on the floor, and take a deep breath in and exhale slowly through your mouth. Take a deep breath in again, and a long, slow exhale through the mouth, letting it go. This is optional. Take your right hand and place it gently on your belly. And the reason we do this is that we want to target the belly as the place where we are breathing. Because most of us, especially when we are aroused or anxious, we tend to do shallow breathing, which is more from the chest. And we want to shift down to diaphragmatic breathing, which is instantly calming. So by placing the hand on the belly, it gives us a place to focus our breath. So as you breathe in, feel your belly expand and push your hand outwards. And as you exhale, your hand pushes your belly back towards the spine. And the only other thing we add with this is a count in which our inhale is roughly 3 to 4 seconds and our exhale is 5, 6, or 7 seconds. So it's important that you combine the belly breathing with a longer exhale, because that is what helps your parasympathetic nervous system take charge of your body and helps you do a reset of your nervous system. So let's try that a couple times. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Feel that belly expand fully. Exhale, feel the belly contract back down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can also try with younger children who are not very good at focusing, or with neurodivergent kids that attention is an issue. Then this is a good one. Like, you breathe, inhale, you go up your finger, and exhale, you go down. Inhale, you go up. Exhale, you go down. So this has the additional benefit of combining sensation with breathing. And if you time your kids and make it like a fun activity, 4 on the inhale, 5 or 6 on the exhale, this is also extremely helpful. Sometimes the visual of a box breathing helps them. Like, you breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. It's a slightly more challenging one that I would use for ourselves or older kids. And another one we often use in our workshops is 4-7-8 breathing, where you inhale for 4, hold your breath for 7, and exhale for 8 through the mouth. And feel free to change these counts. Like, if you're not able to hold your breath for 7 or not able to hold an 8-second exhale, you can make it like 3, 5, 6 or something like that. Just keeping in mind that the exhale has to be longer than the inhale for anything that's when we're working with the yellow or the red zone, to bring it back to the green zone. So we are good. Any questions, or if anybody wants to, we want to do the feedback form now, right?
Yeah, the feedback link is in the chat, and then also we can provide the slides. If you registered for this ahead of time, we should have your email, but if for some reason you didn't and you just got the link, then let us know your email, or in the survey you can also leave your email, and we are happy to send the slides along.
And if anybody has any questions, Laura and I are happy to hang out for a few minutes. Okay, feel free to reach out and ask questions directly to us. Thank you so much for joining this workshop. We appreciate you taking the time. And we log off now. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.